What would you say is the most important role in Valorant? If you said duelist, here's the door. Despite being a role that's often underappreciated, controllers play a huge part in a team's composition. Without controllers, everyone would just be hitting sight with no protection.
What do you mean by that?
Alright, before this video gets out of hand, let's dive into what makes a good controller and how exactly you should be playing the role. If you've wanted to learn how to play controllers in preparation for the new agent coming out, you picked the right video. I'm Chill and let's get into it. As the description of controller states, these agents are experts in slicing up dangerous territory to set their team up for success. Controllers have a few important functions. They provide the team with smokes for map control, their smokes block vision and deny information to the enemy team, and they delay site takes on defense and retakes on attack. They're one of the most important roles in Valorant, and without one, it's significantly harder to engage the enemy and ultimately win the game. They're also some of the most underappreciated agents. From one controller main to another, you're doing a great job just picking one. Your job as a controller on attack is to provide your team with map control by blocking vision and denying info to the enemy team on a site take. You do this by smoking the choke points that an enemy typically plays from. Use your smokes to get onto site, and use your remaining smokes to re-smoke in order to further delay a retake. Your abilities are normally used for post-plant or to assist your team in some way. For Brim, that could be a stim and a post-plant molly lineup. For Omen, it could be flashing your team into site and teleporting into advantageous positions. On defense, a controller's job is to delay site takes and provide cover for retakes with their smokes and or abilities. You want to smoke choke points that lead to site based on audio cues, attacker ability usage, minimap info, or team comms. Watch your smokes for anyone trying to sneak out of them, since you will likely see them before they can see you. If it gets too hot on site, falling back and retaking with your team is a smart play to make. Depending on how many teammates are playing with you, you can be more aggressive by smoking closer to the attackers and taking more map control. You can use your smokes to prevent attackers from killing you or your teammates as you attempt to defuse. Controllers should be decent at communicating their intentions with smokes so your team can have a plan of attack or defense. Tell your team where you're smoking, especially on attack. If a teammate wants to smoke somewhere, you can act quickly and provide one for them. Some examples of what you can say to a teammate are, "I'm going to smoke heaven and spawn," or "Hey, do you want to smoke for garage?" Things like that go a long way and can set your team up for success. On pistol round, most players opt for a ghost and a couple abilities. It really depends on your team's comp and if you have another controller. If that's the case, you'll have plenty of smokes and you can buy abilities and a ghost or a frenzy if that's your preference. Otherwise, I would buy two smokes and abilities and keep the classic. If you're Viper, you can buy a poison orb and both mollies. This is ultimately preference, but I think having two smokes brings more value to pistol round and makes it much easier to defend or take a site. There are some other situations that can arise, which I'll discuss briefly. If you only have one smoke because you are on a save or a site execute didn't work, what are you supposed to do? I would suggest smoking the choke point that poses the biggest threat to your team, or whichever one you believe the enemy will peek from. You can use a smoke to condition the enemy team, or fake your intentions by smoking one side of the map and going to the other. Just be aware, depending on who you play, that you might not have two smokes for the site take, or you wait for the cooldown. Viper and Omen are solid lurk controllers because Viper can activate her smokes anywhere on the map and be somewhere else, while Omen can teleport into sneaky positions or into and out of his smoke and then begin the lurk that way. His ult can also be used as a lurk opportunity, but be aware that the enemy team will be looking for you. Lurking is all about timing, reading how the enemy moves on the map, and sometimes a bit of luck. Lurking successfully will take time and experience, but can pay off if done well. Playing in your smokes is a great way to catch an enemy off guard and net a free pick or trade, but I wouldn't do it all the time because the enemy will see the pattern and use utility on your smokes or just shoot you inside of it. Using a shotgun can be a cheesy way of getting a pick in your smokes as well if you're into that kind of thing. So let's go through each controller and talk about what they bring to a team comp and how to leverage that properly so you can be helpful to your team. As a Brimstone player, you have 3 smokes that last longer than any other agent, including Viper's poison orb with a full charge. You want to be a bit more purposeful with your use of Brim smokes compared to others. I would compare using his smokes to Viper's wall. Once the wall goes down, you are committing to it for the rest of the round. On attack, you want to use the long duration of his smokes to delay a retake as long as you can and save the third one for a re-smoke. His stim beacon can be used for pushing into a site quickly, but make sure your teammates know because the higher rate of fire could affect their aim. Brim also has the longest lasting molly in the game, so you want to save this for post plant 9 times out of 10. I would only really use it elsewhere elsewhere if you are blocking an enemy from peeking a choke point or pushing a defender out of their position. Learning post-plant lineups could come in handy. Brim's ult is another strong ability that should be used to either push an enemy out of an advantageous position or kill or delay spike diffuser. On defense, Brim should play in a position where he can smoke 2 or more choke points to sites or mid. If your team needs a smoke at the other site, you should be able to quickly place one down, so your positioning is pretty important here. After the 20-second duration ends and you believe an enemy is waiting out your smoke, this is a good time to re-smoke the original smoke that you placed. This will cause the attackers to use more utility to get to site or further delay a push and maybe force a rotate. Your stim can help you and your teammate rotate more quickly or be used as a way to buff your retake. Ulting the spike planter is a great way to delay and net a potential kill as well. Astra is arguably the hardest controller to play, and since her big nerf a while back, she hasn't seen as much playtime in rank. Star management is important, and most of the time you want to use your 4 stars as 2 or 3 smokes and 1 grab well or concuss if you use 2 smokes. Since the cooldown on her abilities is 45 seconds, the chances of you getting 2 gravity wells or nova pulses is pretty slim. On attack, most of the time you will want to use 2 stars for smokes when taking sites, a gravity well for post plant, and the last star for a re-smoke. This is obviously subject to change depending on the situation. You can use a concuss or gravity well when taking site if you want to support your teammate, but just know that you won't have it again for post plant most likely. You can choose to use a recall smoke during the round to either fake a smoke somewhere or help your team across a choke point. An example of this would be C long on Haven. You can condition the enemy team by placing a star or smoke in the same spot throughout your attacking rounds. This will deny info and prevent the defenders from rotating early to the site your team is trying to take. Her ult should mostly be used for taking a site by splitting it in some way, or used to defend against the defuse by isolating other enemies. On defense, you can have a standard setup on the site you're playing on with a smoke and gravity well in front. If you hear the enemy team pushing, you can smoke and grav well to delay. Another star can be placed elsewhere as a possible smoke for your teammates. The smoke and grav well combo is very strong on defense. You can use another star to defend a site plant, but I wouldn't do this every round as the enemy will catch on quickly. Depending on if you rotated or not, you would recall 1 or 2 stars from your site to use for retake as a smoke, which can be placed in the choke points or used as a concuss or grav well in enemy positions. Her ult is great for helping your team retake a site. It should be used to prevent the enemy from shooting you or hearing you defuse. You can place it close to the spike so it takes enemies longer to reach you, but make sure you have a teammate watching for the peak. Viper is one of the most important controllers depending on the map. On Breeze and Icebox, Viper is very strong. She's the most optimal agent you can use on these maps, and learning her can be a blessing for your team. Knowing the best spots for Viper's wall to delay or take site is important for making her work. On these maps, there are meta walls that you can use. Her Poison Orb Molly combo is a very powerful strategy for post plan as well. On attack, learning those meta walls will help, and you should place it right before you start heading into site so the enemy doesn't catch on too early in the round or buy phase. You want to calm to your team when the wall is going up and down. Use the wall either on cooldown when your poison depletes or whenever the enemy is attempting to defuse to make the fight over spike safer for your team. The Poison Orb can go on the spike plant or in an area you need to smoke that your wall can't. Knowing post plant lineups can be very annoying for the defending team and can win you rounds safely. I wouldn't prioritize lineups over fighting with your team if they need it, so look at the situation you're in and determine the most appropriate time to use lineups. I would say if you're even or down a teammate compared to the defenders, you should assist your team. If they die, then you can go for the lineups as long as you're able to get them on the spike in time. As for her ult, you pretty much want to save this for planting and post plant. You gain a huge advantage since the enemy will lose health, but just make sure you calm to your team in case they have other plans. Defensive setups, if done well, can deter a team from wanting to go to your site, so you want to make sure your wall placement blocks as much vision as possible and gets the most value for your team. Since her wall is so long, you can often smoke multiple choke points, which is obviously better than just one. You can save your wall for retake, but I would use a Poison Orb as your smoke if you plan on doing that. The Poison Orb can also be used as a recharging one-way on certain areas, so take advantage of that if you can. Your Poison Orbs can be used for anti-plant, prevent attackers from pushing after your smokes go down to further delay, or pushing someone out of a position on retakes. Using her ult on defense can further deter attackers from entering your site, so using it as the round starts can give your team a huge advantage. Using mollies and choke points in your ult can be deadly as well. Finally, we have Omen. Omen is a great agent to learn because of his near global smokes, ability to get into high ground positions, and deceptive teleports. Using his abilities in tandem with each other can make it really hard for the enemy to know what you're doing. You can also play in his smokes similar to Astra because they're hollow. His flash ability covers a huge width of space and can be very hard to dodge. His ult has a number of possible uses and can give the enemy trouble if used aggressively. On attack, Omen's smokes can be used in choke points, leading to sight as usual. His blind is a great ability you can use to assist your team into a sight by blinding multiple angles for your teammates to follow up on. Communication is key here. Don't flash your teammates and just use your minimap as a guide. He can also use a teleport to get into areas safely or prevent a defender from seeing him past their line of sight. Think on Haven from spawn across a lobby into sewers. Your recharged third smoke can be used for a resmoke on post plant. As for his ult, this is a good time to teleport into areas where your team is hitting so you can get info on who's playing on site. This doubles as a distraction for the site player as your team pours in and if it's timed correctly. You can also ult into their spawn and begin your lurk, but this is risky. On defense, Omen can smoke entrances to site that he is playing on and have a second ready for any other choke points that the enemy may be showing presence. Since Omen's smokes recharge, you can technically have up to 6 per round, but that will depend on how late the spike is planted and how quickly you deployed smokes on cooldown. 6 is the max, but you'll most likely get 3 or 4 during a normal round. You can also use more one-ways than most controllers since you can place the smoke arrow indicator on top of certain objects like doors and boxes. One-ways can be really effective and annoying for attackers to get past. The blind can be used to initiate a retake by throwing it into areas you suspect attackers are playing. You can also use it to delay a site push and for teleporting out into safety if you're on site. A risky play you can make is blinding attackers and then teleporting behind them since they won't see or hear it. It's super risky and should only be attempted a couple times per game. The ult can be used in a similar manner as you would on attack, either in spawn for a lurk or to rotate instantly to another site. To sum all of this up, as a controller, your job is to use your vision blocking abilities to create opportunity for your team, delay attackers, deny information to defenders, and gain map control. Communication is important for a controller player with respect to timing your smokes and assisting your teammates. Regardless of your role, communication goes a long way and can be the difference between winning and losing. There are various situations that call for different strategies based on your agent and team comp, so look at who your teammates and enemy team are playing and find synergies and holes in each. If you're playing Astra, you can combine a Raise Nade with your Gravity Well. If you're Viper, your Poison Decay with Sova Shock Darts. Each controller has utility that can be beneficial for a number of reasons. Finding the best spots for each controller's smokes will help your team greatly. If you plan on switching to a controller after watching this video, you are making the right decision. Learn the ins and outs of your controller and try to get comfortable with the abilities and playstyle. I would suggest eventually learning 2 controllers, including Viper and another controller, so you'll always have the optimal smokes for each map. And that's going to be it for this one. If you want to see another guide like this for another role, just let me know down in the comments. Drop a like and subscribe if you enjoyed your stay. If you thought this video was helpful, but you want to know a little bit more about smokes, here's a guide that does just that. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.